Story of Grey Towers Castle begins in 1886, when the eccentric and brilliant architect Frank Furness designed the mansion for William Welsh Harrison, a wealthy industrialist whose ambition was not merely to build a home but to construct a fortress of status, dominance, and mystery on the edge of Philadelphia. And from the very beginning, Grey Towers was unlike any other mansion of its era, rising abruptly from the landscape with jagged stone walls, looming turrets, and an almost medieval hostility in its design, as if it were meant to intimidate rather than welcome, and the construction itself was surrounded by quiet hardship, because laborers worked with massive stone blocks, unstable scaffolding, and primitive machinery, leading to multiple injuries that were never recorded in detail, as was common for elite projects of the time. While whispers persisted among local workers that the site felt oppressive even before the castle was completed. Once finished, Grey Towers became a place of rigid hierarchy and isolation, where servants moved through shadowed corridors, narrow staircases, and service passages designed to keep them unseen, reinforcing the sharp divide between power and labor, and staff later spoke of strict rules, sudden dismissals, and an atmosphere where silence was valued more than loyalty, as Harrison demanded absolute control over his environment, hosting selective gatherings while remaining emotionally distant, a pattern that gave the castle a reputation as cold and watchful rather than celebratory. Architecturally, Grey Towers was filled with optical illusions, angled walls, irregular windows, and asymmetrical rooms that distorted sound and light, causing voices to echo unpredictably and footsteps to seem closer or farther away than they were, which led many servants and later occupants to report disorientation, anxiety, and the persistent feeling of being followed, especially at night, when the castle's heavy stone absorbed sound and amplified isolation. After Harrison's death, the mansion passed through a series of owners and uses, each leaving behind traces of neglect, frustration, and emotional residue, and during periods when the castle stood partially empty, caretakers reported unexplained noises, doors opening without drafts, shadows moving along staircases, and lights appearing in rooms that had been sealed. Incidents often dismissed as imagination but repeated with unsettling consistency, as Grey Towers transitioned into an institutional and later academic space. Students and staff reported intense psychological effects, describing certain rooms as oppressive, inducing headaches, unease, and insomnia, while others avoided specific towers and corridors altogether due to persistent rumors of accidents, emotional breakdowns, and late-night disturbances. And although no single violent tragedy defines the castle's history, the accumulation of smaller incidents, injuries, emotional strain, strict control, abandonment, and architectural hostility created a legacy far darker than overt scandal. Restoration efforts revealed sealed rooms, altered passageways, and structural modifications that suggested earlier attempts to hide damage or restrict access, reinforcing the idea that Grey Towers was a place where problems were concealed rather than confronted. And even today, visitors often remark that the castle feels less like a historic mansion and more like a psychological monument, structure that reflects the anxieties, power struggles, and emotional distance of the era that created it. Ultimately, the true darkness of Grey Towers Castle does not come from ghosts or legends, but from its essence as a fortress of control, built to project authority, sustained by silence, and shaped by human ambition that prioritized dominance over comfort, leaving behind a place where beauty and menace coexist, and where every stone wall, narrow corridor, and looming tower quietly reminds those who enter that not all grand architecture is meant to inspire, some is meant to watch, to dominate, and to endure long after the people who demanded control have vanished into history. Grey Towers Castle was completed in 1886 near Philadelphia and immediately stood apart from the grand mansions of its era, not because of luxury or elegance, but because of its aggressive and unsettling design. Commissioned by wealthy industrialist William Welsh Harrison and created by architect Frank Furness, a man famous for rejecting traditional beauty and symmetry, instead favoring structures that expressed power, tension, and dominance, and from the very beginning Grey Towers was never meant to feel warm or welcoming, as its jagged stone walls, heavy turrets, narrow windows, and fortress-like silhouette were deliberately designed to intimidate and command attention rather than comfort its occupants. Unlike typical Gilded Age homes that emphasized balance and openness, Grey Towers used asymmetry throughout its exterior and interior, with uneven towers, irregular rooflines, angled corridors, and mismatched staircases that caused sound and light to behave unpredictably, creating echoes, shadows, and visual confusion that many early visitors found unsettling, a reaction that continues even today. During construction, workers handled massive stone blocks using unstable scaffolding and limited safety equipment, leading to multiple documented injuries, while other incidents went unrecorded, as was common in elite projects of the late 19th century. And these early hardships contributed to the building's reputation as physically demanding and psychologically heavy even before it was occupied. Inside the castle, servant life was deliberately hidden, with narrow service corridors, steep back staircases, and concealed routes that kept staff invisible, reinforcing strict social hierarchy and isolation, while household rules were rigidly enforced and servants were reportedly dismissed abruptly for minor mistakes, creating an atmosphere of constant pressure and silence. Grey Towers also became known for its unusual acoustic properties, where footsteps echoed down long corridors and voices carried unpredictably between rooms, leading caretakers and later occupants to report frequent false alarms and the sensation of unseen movement, particularly at night when the castle's thick stone absorbed warmth and amplified sound. After Harrison's death, the mansion passed through multiple owners and institutional uses, including educational purposes, and during these periods, maintenance challenges increased as storms caused leaks, stone deterioration, and internal dampness, forcing certain areas to be sealed or modified, and during later renovations, previously closed rooms and altered passageways were discovered without clear documentation, suggesting earlier attempts to restrict access or address structural issues quietly. Students, staff, and caretakers over the decades consistently reported psychological effects linked to prolonged time inside the castle, including unease, headaches, insomnia, and an instinctive avoidance of certain corridors and towers, not tied to any single tragedy but to the cumulative effect of isolation, darkness, and disorienting architecture. Importantly, Grey Towers Castle is not associated with confirmed murders or major violent crimes, and its dark reputation does not come from sensational events, but rather from how architecture, power, and human behavior intersected within its walls, making it an example of how buildings can influence emotion and experience. Today, Grey Towers stands as a preserved historic structure and educational site, admired for its architectural boldness and studied for its psychological impact, serving as a reminder that not all grand buildings are designed to inspire joy, and that some, like Grey Towers Castle, were built to project authority, control, and endurance, leaving behind a legacy that feels heavy not because of ghosts, but because of human intention embedded deeply into stone.